Hi guys, and welcome back. The last type of probe that I wanted to talk about is this readiness probe here. And remember that the difference between liveness and readiness is that readiness is just kind of temporarily taking your pod and container offline. So rather than forwarding traffic to certain pods, you can basically just designate that they are in a not ready state temporarily and then bring them back online later on. So what you could do, for example, is if you wanted to maybe take a snapshot of an application and you don't want any inbound traffic to run during that period, you could set up a custom endpoint on your application so that it doesn't run under certain conditions. So for example, imagine that in our web application here, we add in another endpoint. So let's go under our server.ps1 here. So let's say that we were to add in another endpoint that basically indicates that the pod should be considered not ready for maybe a couple of minutes in an hour. So we could say add pod route, and I'll say method get, and then for the path, I'm going to specify a path of readiness. And so we're going to point our readiness probe at this readiness endpoint here. And then for the script block here, I'm going to say that if the minute, the current minute, we'll say getDate.minute. And if we run that, that's just going to give us the current minute in the of the system time. And so we could say that if the minute is in between, let's say greater than 8 but less than, we'll say getDate.minute is less than 10. So from the minutes 8 to 10, we want to basically say that this should be offline. And so what we could do here is just send a response that indicates that the application is unhealthy. So we could do maybe a response code of like, 500 or 501 or something like that. So if the minute is between 8 and 10, I'll go ahead and just say set code response status, and we'll set the code to 500. And then if the minute is anything else, then we'll go ahead and say set code response status to code of 200. And then I'll say write code response, and we'll just do an HTML response and say value healthy, or maybe just readiness here. And then, so basically, depending on what the HTTP status code is, that's going to determine if it's healthy or not. So right now it's 6:09 p.m. So maybe I'll actually bump this from like maybe 9 to 11 here. And then I'm going to go ahead and quickly rebuild this image and push it up to the container registry. And then what we're going to do is deploy a new replica set from this updated container image. Now we need to do this kind of quickly because we need to make sure that we do it before the minute hits 11. Otherwise, the readiness probe will just indicate that it's healthy. So let's go ahead and just build this and push it up. And once it's been pushed up, we'll go ahead and come over to our server and we'll edit our deployment here. And we'll add in a readiness probe, and we'll set that to HTTP GET, and we'll say port 80 path/readiness, and we'll go ahead and just save and quit that. And so now what we can do is go ahead and just apply that to our server, and we have 6:10 p.m. here, so we're still before 6:11. And so what we should see happen is the containers successfully initialize, and they should be considered live by Kubernetes because technically the web application is up and running. However, as far as the readiness state, we're basically going to determine that it's kind of not ready. And it looks like it actually just turned to 6:11. So I'm going to go ahead and just change some of these parameters really quick and then re-push this so we can try it out again. So I'll change the minute from 11 to 14, and then I'll go ahead and just rebuild this. And then once it's been rebuilt one more time, we'll go ahead and come back to our deployment here. We'll say vim deployment, and let's just go ahead and change something about this. And we'll say maybe period seconds 4 instead. And then we'll go ahead and reapply that. And then we'll do a get on our replica sets here. And as you can see, we've got a brand new replica set here. So what we're going to do is look for the pods in this new replica set. Let's do get pod. And we should have a bunch of new pods here from the 687 replica set. And here is the first new pod that's been created. So let's do kubectl describe. Of course, I need to say pod there as well. And if I describe this, you can see that the startup probe is currently failing, and the readiness probe is failing as well. And that's because we're under minute 14, so it's 6:13 right now. And you can see that the readiness probe is actually getting an HTTP 500. And that's kind of what we expected to happen. So as soon as the minute changes to 6:14, that readiness probe should actually start to succeed, and the pod should be considered ready. So you can see that it is initialized, and Kubernetes is not killing it because technically the application is considered to be alive. However, the pod has actually been marked in a not ready state. And as soon as that readiness probe runs after it turns 6:14, we should see this readiness state change from false over to true. But in the meantime, it's basically just going to continue failing. All right, so now the minute has changed to 14, and if we run describe pod here again, you can see that a number of times the readiness probe failed. However, now that it's 14 minutes, the ready state has actually changed back to true, because the readiness probe should be receiving an HTTP 200 instead of an HTTP 500. So that's how you can set kind of a custom condition in your application to mark the pod as not ready. However, it can still be considered initialized as far as the startup probe is concerned, and as far as the liveness probe is concerned, the container is considered healthy because it was still able to hit our /home endpoint internally, but the readiness endpoint was returning an HTTP 500, so Kubernetes decided to take that pod kind of offline, so to speak, or mark it as not ready, just on a temporary basis. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.